Hey everybody, welcome back to Lead with Worship, a worship podcast from the team here at Saddleback Church. My name is John Cassetto, and I have the honor of serving as the global worship pastor here at Saddleback. And on this podcast, you'll hear from artists, creatives, and guests as we uncover the heart and the purpose of worship. Throughout our time together, our prayer is that you would be encouraged, inspired, and challenged in your own creative journey and worship leadership. You know, here at Saddleback, we work really hard to ensure our platform and production teams are united in heart and vision. And so today, on today's podcast, you're going to hear from some of our production team as they unpack the heart of serving and building a unified culture. So you're going to hear Taylor talk to Brittany and Connor and Daniel, and it's really a great conversation. I love these guys on our production team and just how they are building something really prevailing and sustaining and just united. Not just within the production team, but between the production and the platform ministries. So I'm really excited for you to hear this conversation. So let's dive into today's conversation. Here we go.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Lead with Worship. My name's Taylor and I'm on the worship staff here with Saddleback Church, and I'm here today with my friends Connor Jenkins, Daniel Scotty, and Brittany Krimmel. Hey guys, how's it going? Good to see you all.
What is up?
Good to see you, Taylor.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Brittany Krimmel is our production manager at our Lake Forest campus. She directs and produces services on the weekends. She's running the world there. Daniel Scotty is our central production director, overseeing production at all of our regional campuses. And Connor is is the audio lead at Saddleback Church. And so we're super grateful to have you guys with us today. All things audio.
Everything.
You can ask Connor.
All these mics he helped us get.
All these
It's
mics
true.
he helped us get. This recorded, like the template that we're recording into.
If
That's
it sounds
all
good,
Connor.
if it sounds good, it's me.
Yeah.
It sounds bad.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So anyway, super grateful to have you guys with us today. And I know that today we're going to dive into some great conversation around just production and just the world of that and pastoring production people and the relationship between production and the platform ministries and how all of that works together and how we can be unified in vision. But before we dive into all of that, I would just love to hear from you guys. Maybe take us back to the moment, and maybe we start with you, Connor. Take us back to the moment when you first felt called into ministry from a production standpoint.
Yeah. So, been working at Saddleback for like 8 years now.
Wow.
Started as a drummer in high school ministry at our Irvine campus when it was one campus. Shout out to Irvine. Then realized I'm not a very good drummer. So I knew that that wasn't my thing, but I knew I wanted to be involved in worship ministry at some level. Didn't know what that was. I actually attended a CM. It was Crave at the time. Shout out to Crave. I think Daniel was probably there. I don't remember Daniel,
Probably.
but he probably was there. And I remember seeing the console and being like, well, that looks cool. Maybe I should do that. And probably a few months later, summoned the courage to apply for an internship, which didn't exist. And then from there, it was just like fell in love with audio and knew that this was what I wanted to do. Didn't really have any interest in any of the other disciplines and just knew audio's for me. And I was obsessed and still obsessed and grateful that I found it.
Love it. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
What about you, Daniel?
Yeah. Like Connor, I'm a failed drummer. So I
It's a common theme.
I love it. I'm a field drummer as well, so
Oh,
you're in
boy.
good company.
Perfect. Did you ever drum?
Unfortunately, I'm not a field drummer.
Okay.
So
But
not
you're
a,
still a
not a
good
drummer
one.
at all, actually.
But
Okay,
fun
okay.
facts, Brittany does have drumsticks in her car currently.
True.
You never know.
Never know.
Why? We don't know. But,
So youth group was on the worship team. My dad was a pastor, so I kind of just lived at the church, and one of my good friends also was helping with audio, and I was like, well, I want to hang out with my friend MJ, and he was always kind of mixing for a youth group and stuff. So I started to get plugged into that while also semi-playing drums for my youth group, and our worship leader was like, hey, you're pretty good at audio. So like, let's stick to that. Like, you don't practice that much on drums. So from there on, I just, loved some of the behind the scenes stuff of tech and music and worship. And then fast forward to my time here at Saddleback. I've been here for 15 years and have just kind of been open-handed to whatever needs are there. And if there's an audio need. That's kind of my primary practice, I guess, of what I probably spent the most time doing. But figured lighting stuff out is cool, and kind of did interim lighting stuff and used to like service produce and stuff like that. So just kind of whatever was needed, I would just step into.
I love that. That's so cool, Daniel.
But yeah.
What about you, Brittany?
So I grew up in a really small church plant, and I had a mentor that convinced me to come serve in production with her. She ran our graphics, and she said, "Why don't you come sit next to me and run lights?" And so that's how I got into production. And then kind of our team was so small that it was like you could do production and band. And so I kind of did the whole like do lights one weekend, do vocals one weekend. And then when I got to college, learned that being a producer was a role. And that's where I was like, this is it. This is everything I've ever wanted. Like, it's both worlds merged into one. I was like, it's beautiful. This is the whole thing. And from there, I was sold. And that was the story.
That's so great. That's so cool how like it was such a simple invitation for all of you guys of like, it wasn't like this big, we need you to do this massive thing. It was just like, hey, come hang. Like just such a simple invitation in that. I really, really love that, guys. Man. You know, I would love to ask you guys too, like, especially from just thinking of like you guys who have been like on sort of like both sides of the world, like in the platform and in the production side of things, like what does it look like to unify those worlds? Because I think I've been in a lot of churches in a lot of different contexts where it feels, you can feel the tension and you can feel kind of the gap between those things. And so what are some ways that we can bring those things together?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing, if you look at a weekend or a worship service or whatever you're putting your time towards, if your interaction with the people you're working with are always in a deadline, service starts at 9 a.m., we have all this stuff to set up and run through, that usually makes it difficult for there to be a lot of like relational time to get to know who you're working with. And especially within, the context of being a part of a local church and serving teams together, you're interacting with the same people for the most part, time and time again. So that making sure that there's actual space prior to those like high stress moments to get to know each other is so helpful in building trust and relationship and getting to know people, so that when you do jump into like really stressful environments, you guys have like some relational equity there. I think is probably like what goes the further, or what I've experienced being really helpful in serving together and stuff.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. There's so much like in that space that's really important, like for the relational side of things, the relational connection and different things. I think what I loved about that space too, Daniel, that you talk about, is that you can get to know one another too. You're not just kind of like walking into the booth or like walking into the stage, but there's camaraderie that's built in the margins for sure.
Yeah, relational collateral is huge. The first, when someone comes at you about something especially negative and you have no idea who they are, your instinct is going to be defensive and like, I don't know what's going on. Like, why is this person telling me this thing is wrong or whatever? And same from our side as a production team.
Yep.
I feel like a lot of times we are detail oriented and we see where things we're lacking. And so our first approach is like, let's fix that.
Yeah.
But instead of being like, hey, how are you? It's like, dude, your guitar tone sucks. Can we fix that? And it's like, that's the first time they've heard your voice. It may be the first time they've ever encountered you.
Yeah.
And so learning to like think about it before and go, hey, how's it going? Start a conversation. My name's Connor. I had an issue, or not an issue, but I had I guess it was an issue this weekend. The drummer, I don't know what was happening. I'd look down, everything's fine. Look up, the snare drum mic was like a foot away from the snare drum. And I thought, well, maybe he's just getting like really lit up there and it's just moving. And so I was like, but I don't, so I fixed it. Next service, same thing happens. I'm like, he's got to be doing something. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go talk to this guy. And it's the first time I've talked to him this entire weekend. And so I'm like, hey, my name's Connor. And it's like, hey, and we're just start talking, and then we talk, and then it's like, hey, do you notice if the snare drum's moving? He's like, yeah, I think it's the stand. And I was like, oh, okay. I thought it was him. It wasn't. And thankfully I didn't just go at him like, dude, why do you keep moving your stuff? It's like,
Yeah, that wouldn't have been good.
That wouldn't have been good. And it's not, and it's like one of those things where it's just like, you got to approach it gently and kindly and just kind of like take a second. I know it's like for us, it's like I need to get this done right now.
Yeah.
But it's like take a second, introduce yourself, then address the issue, and you might be caught off guard by what the actual issue is.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, Connor, because I think that, and I love that you went there, because I was just about to take us here anyway, of like the practical ways that we can sort of like mend the gap in these different areas. But what I'm hearing there is like there's such a posture of service that you're starting with there, of beyond the end goal, which is like, okay, like we're gonna make this thing sound good, or make this process clean, or we're gonna make the programming smooth, or whatever that thing, whatever the thing is that you're trying to accomplish, but approaching that with a posture of service, of like introducing yourself, to start, of like, hey, I really want to make your mix great. I really want to do things like this. But just the heart posture in that is really, really great and goes so far.
Yeah, and I think too, like as the production people, sometimes I remember like you're saying, like being on both sides. I remember thinking the production people were so intimidating and scary, and I didn't want to like upset them or do anything like play too loud or whatever. And it's like if we automatically, hey, I'm Connor, nice to meet you. Oh, I like this. We're tearing down that wall right away.
Right.
And it's like, I'm friendly. You can talk to me. Let's figure this out.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially volunteers. Like, I don't want any volunteer to be intimidated by me.
Right.
Totally.
And one thing I appreciate about our team values that John and Steph has led is just like our core verse is let love be our highest goal, from 1 Corinthians 14:1. And because that really sets the tone for how we operate as a production team. Before we like want to be the greatest like audio engineers or, service producers or instrumentalists or whatever, like what is it if we can't love each other well? And that goes into how we communicate, how we serve one another. And I don't know. I feel like that's at the bedrock of a lot of what we do. It really stems from that. If we walk away from a service and it was like, oh man, that was really stressful, and everyone like got super short and nitpicky with each other or whatever, it's like, oh, that we didn't love each other well. But most of the time we're walking away being like, wow, that was crazy. You good? We good? Yeah. And there's like this respect for one another that kind of goes beyond just like, we always say like people over the product, or people over production, or people over the process. People have to go first in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. What does that look like on a weekend? Like from start to finish, how is there unity taking place in that? I know like we talk about the, Timmer's mentioned previously on a previous podcast about like the currency of love being information.
Yeah.
What does that look like for us, like from start to finish, like on a weekend service?
Well, it actually starts well before the weekend. So we have what we lovingly refer to as our favorite meeting of the week on Wednesday afternoons with all of our platform and production teams that are leading weekends, where we talk about the previous weekend. And we always start that meeting where we talk about wins, things that went right. So if you are familiar with the 4 helpful lists, talking about what went right, what went well, where do we see God move, what good conversations do we have with people, what volunteers are stepping into leadership, like all that kind of good stuff, which is helpful because the next part of that list, as we are reflecting and debriefing on that conversation, is what didn't go well, what information or communication were we missing, what systems are confusing or things do we need to clarify, like all kinds of things like that. But celebrating and starting with those wins helps us just be kinder to each other moving forward.
That's good.
And then when we have those lists of like, oh, we need to, shore that system up or whatever, and then we go into the following week, it helps us not make the same mistakes twice. And then we're more prepared and we're kinder to each other because we're more aware of what's going on. And we also have a lot of fun in that meeting, and we get to see each other face to face and all kinds of things like that.
Yeah.
And no one likes the person that only contributes negative things.
Yeah.
So like it's great that that space has time to like, let's all celebrate the good things.
Yeah.
And then we could talk about the hard things. But
Because just like
we've had to work
calling.
with Connor on that.
100%. Like I'm always like, I feel like I'm frothing at the mouth to get to the negative part, and it's like learning in the last, since we've been doing this in the last like year or so, it's like, what's the positive things that happen before the negative? Like, let's celebrate things. Because, there's so much good happening.
Yeah.
But I'm focused on the one negative thing.
Right.
And also, it's just silly. So it's like taking that time to do that, and we're all in a room together, and it's like, we're out of the moment too. There's no like, oh, we got to do this like in like 5 minutes. It's like, take our time, celebrate,
Yep.
go.
And isn't that's like the role of a production person? Like, no one looks back when the service is going really well and they're like, yeah, thumbs up from the audience to the production booth.
Yeah.
They only look back when you hear some feedback or when stuff doesn't work. They're like, hey, you guys
The
getting
lyrics
that?
don't come up. And they're like, where are those?
Yeah. But that's the joy of what we get to do.
Yeah.
That's so good. I'm actually like terrible at operating lyrics. Like, fun fact. Like, I used to do it like in, Brittany knows we went to college together. Like, I used to do it in college. And I'm like, so mad props to anyone who runs graphics at your church or anything like that.
Shout out.
Shout out to graphics.
Because I'm like sitting there and I'm hitting spacebar and I'm like worshiping and I'm like singing. And then like, I noticed like it doesn't change. Like the lyric didn't change. And my producer mind is like, well, who's supposed to be doing that? Like how come that's wrong? And I'm like, wait, that's me.
Taylor's a good 2 choruses behind. You're
Yes.
like, oh, we're in the bridge now. My bad, guys.
So never asked me to run graphics. So mad props to all you who do that. I'd love to know, like, so for the people that are on you guys' teams, like the volunteers that you guys have, like what is training them and discipling them look like in a production context? Because we talk about this with band, we talk about it with vocals. Like, yes, like there's a weekend service or a thing that we're serving and there's a people that we're serving in front of us. But a lot of times that space is an excuse for discipleship. And so what does that look like for you guys in the context that you serve?
Yeah, I think it's super cool because we get to minister to people maybe in a similar personality as us and not like a platform team member. So the people shy, outcast, not super social, and bringing them into a team and being like, no, sorry, you don't get to hide back here. Like, I know you want to, and I know it's your natural inkling, but you're not going to. So like, be a part of this team. Maybe they all, I think we all deep down biblically want to be a part of a family and a part of a community. It's just hard for some of us to, myself included, get out and do that. And that's what church did for me. Like, gave me a family, made me break out. Like, Daniel's known me for a long time. I was not, the fact that I'm talking on here right now, it would have not happened 8 years ago. Like, I would not have been able to get a word out. So it's like, it changes and it changes your personality. So being like, hey, I know like you have a normal job. Maybe you're an IT guy commonly. Shout out to IT guys. But let's like get you talking to people who are a little different than you, you know, and break you out of your shell a little bit and like shake some hands and let's like be the guy, you know, and a lot of people are pretty good at like, we are a service, you know, we're serving the worship team. We are serving our congregation. And so kind of changing that, I think that softens your heart, just changes you as a person, being more involved and being like the drummer or whomever, or the worship leader is talking to me like a human. And it's like, I'm held on the similar stage. Like I'm held in the similar level. Yep. And so, and I'm supporting them. They can't do what they do without us and vice versa. So it's like, we're all a part of this. We're all helping together. It's all a ecosystem and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. That's really good. That's really good. I love the vision that you point to there too, Connor. And I think that's we talked about this a little bit earlier, but like the circle up moment that we do at the beginning of service of like, I've been like in a lot of ministries too, where you kind of just roll into it. You know, you kind of just roll in, you go to your spot or whatever, you kind of just get started, you start figuring things out, but just the moment to stop and like I know at our Lake Forest and a lot of our campuses, everyone just comes to the stage or everyone goes to the booth in just one space. You know, we're one team. We're in one, and we have one vision that we're walking towards, and whoever will. And sometimes that's the producer. Sometimes that's the audio guy at some of our campuses. Sometimes that's the worship leader who's giving vision for the weekend of like just a reminder of, hey, like you're not just here to set up a sound system, but you actually are making a way for the gospel to be proclaimed. Right. You know, lifting people's eyes beyond the things that they see in front of them into what God's actually inviting them into for that weekend. I feel like there's so much there that you're hitting on, Connor. That's
and
really
that's
good.
the big, what are you inviting people into when they're joining your ministry? Because if it is transactional of just like, hey, we have this need, this gap, this spot, then typically your environment will be treated like that. That it's just like filling gaps and plugging holes and stuff, compared to like, it might be a little bit more harder and take more effort and make you kind of come out of your shell a bit more, is to be transformational and walking the life with people and doing life together with people and inviting them into the bigger picture of what's happening in our church.
Yeah.
Compared to like, hey, you like sound? Come mix. Like, just come push these faders. Cool, good job. See you next week. Compared to like, man, what an awesome weekend. Like, God did this. Let's go see the baptisms happening this week or whatever. Inviting them into the full picture of what we get to be a part of is so huge in the invitation. Because sometimes it weeds people out who they only want to be there just to do the tech stuff and just to like push faders, which is great. But we want so much more from our team in that aspect.
That's really good.
We want more for them than more from them.
Yeah.
That's good.
Because I think for like longevity too, it's like you can come do audio, but I think there's some people that like I think would come just to hang. Like they don't really care if they're operating that weekend. They just want to come hang out because we're their family and we're their friends, and it's like they enjoy. We're lighthearted. We laugh. We do all these things, but we also like we're there for each other. So it's like they would be there every weekend even if they weren't operating.
Right.
Yeah, that's so kingdom too. I think like where you're finding like we talk about like the family of God and like in the kingdom of God, and people. I was that church kid. Like I think about like the guys like who just they would just come and hang and just be there. Like you said, Connor, just because they want to be there and they want to be around guys. I used to go to like my youth pastor's office like after school, like in high school, just because I wanted to be there. I wanted to be like around him. I wanted to be around like the people like who were pointing me to Jesus and invited me into something like that was so much bigger than myself. And so I love that. Those spaces are so important. Gosh, I love this next question. Uh-oh. I want to ask you guys. Yes, get ready for it. What's one thing that you wish platform people maybe knew?
I got a good one.
I'm ready.
All right.
I'm nervous.
No, I think this has been I've learned to communicate this more effectively in the last, I think, 2 years because of just our jobs got crazier with COVID. They did not get simpler. It got way more hectic. And just learning like for my own mental health, like I need people to know this. And it's basically that like what we're doing is our craft and it's what we're passionate about. It's what we love. It's not like, for instance, like my mix, when I mix on a weekend or for broadcast or my monitor mix or whatever, like we've put our blood, sweat, and tears into that and we care about it. Yeah. It's not this like distant thing that we don't. So when you talk about it, whether it's like critiquing, which I think is most things are totally valid, but there needs to be a level of like gentleness with that because you have spent my favorite thing is like you spent like 72 hours on this mix, show it to someone, they're like, dude, this is gonna sound so good when it's mixed, and you're just like
oh no.
Devastated.
Oh no. And then so it's like we're putting time and effort into these things, and so don't see it as like it's like your voice. Like if someone critiqued your voice, it's a very personal thing. It's who you are. Same with us. It's our product. It's like what we do. Yeah. And it's what we bring to the table. And so a level of like gentleness and kindness with that, I think would be much appreciated if it's whether it's lights, whether it's even though it seems like it's a piece of machinery up here. Yeah. It's still like
there's craft and
our
artistry
craft.
to that.
Exactly.
For sure.
And so it's like coming to those kind of things, like knowing that and not just assuming like he doesn't care that we don't like this. It's like, no, I'm going to think about it for the next 2 weeks and not sleep, and so I don't know, I'm glad I got to communicate that because that's been something, and I didn't understand it either. Yeah. I was like, oh, I do care. Like this is like something. Totally. And it's like hard to explain sometimes, but it's like, no, I care about this. And when someone talks about it negatively, it hurts my feelings. And it's like, if they come at it really harsh, I'm like, oh, maybe I suck at my job, So it's like, there is a level of like, just like how and I think production people have done a really bad job of that. Like, hey, can you sing right? It's like, why would you say that to somebody? Like, it's their voice. Like, or can you play the right note? It's like, they're trying, it's like assuming that everyone like, me and my wife have been taking this, or we're doing this Bible study for married couples. And it's about big part of it is about like assuming the best. In your spouse. And so assuming that like this person is trying, this person is doing their best. And so don't be like they don't care at all. Like, don't assume they care at all. Like, assume that they've been putting a lot of effort into this, a lot of time. And so approach it with some kindness and some gentleness.
That's good.
That's good. Thank you for voicing that. I love that. I think there's something there as well with like serving each other. I think about like platform people as well, of like there shouldn't just be critique or instruction from just one side. I know that Chad, who's one of our music directors here and actually mixes this podcast.
Shout out Chad.
Shout out to Chad.
Hi, Chad.
He always mentions to different instrumentalists like a really good practice of like going to the sound booth and asking.
Yeah.
Like he's an electric guitarist and a great guitarist, and but he still goes back whenever he's at a new campus or a new space, he'll go back to the sound booth and to a trusted engineer and say, hey, like, what did you think of like my guitar tone? Like just the way like it's sitting in the mix and like different parts or whatever. Because he realizes that he's providing something for the front of house guy to mix as well. That it's not just his guitar there, but like there's a greater picture at play. Yeah. And so I just always felt like that was so honoring of like recognizing someone else's craft, recognizing what someone else is putting their hands to. And I feel like there's so much there that as worship leaders and platform people that we can lean into, of just asking questions to our producers and our sound people of like, how are things translating? Hey, when I did that, like, did that feel okay? Because a lot of times we all just have a part of the picture at play. And so to lean into each other there, I think is so important for sure.
Yeah, it's more collaborative than like
Right.
the worship team is going to do what they do, and we're just like holding on and writing it out. It's like, no, like, how did that affect you? Like, oh.
Right. Because it's all part of the bigger picture for the worship experience as a whole. How are we helping people experience Jesus? And so if you just kind of like go into these silos, then, well, that's not going to turn into a great experience for anybody, for the platform friends, for production friends, for congregation that comes to experience it. So you need to collaborate, just like our friend Chad does, with each other to make a great experience for everyone, for our whole church family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think for me, one thing, like just for those who are not technical, they don't have to know the weeds or details of it, but to know the cost of it, because it's going to cost one way or another. Like maybe it will cost financially more, but maybe it will cost hours or personal time or whatever it may be. There's usually a cost that isn't known. And when you help fill the gap in that way, most of the time people are like, oh, energy, effort, time, whatever, it's not worth it to do that. Or sometimes, hey, this is a big thing coming up. We do want to put the energy towards that. And that comes with relationship to help you communicate those things. If it's just a directive, we got to get this done, and we're on a team and we all know, it's like, hey, we know the cost, we're going to do it. And that's kind of the gift of being a part of a production person, is you have this like magic wand that no one knows how that happened, but it happened and it was great. But then we could go back and communicate the cost, or if there's last minute changes, we could say, yes, we can make that happen. Here's what it's going to take.
Yep.
Our team just finished a set build. We're going to have to come in on Friday to set up these additional pieces. So probably won't get a day. And sometimes they'll be like, you know what, let's table it this week. Let's try and hit it next week. But just to communicate the costs, I think, or allow there to be space for someone to understand that, or to even be asked, hey, what's that change going to cost? Like, what's it really going to take to pull that off? I think it's helpful coming from someone who might not understand the details. And I don't want people to know or have to get into my brain of like all the technical elements of it.
Yeah.
And there's a fine line being a production person to where sometimes people don't ask that because you'll get over talked. People start saying words like frequencies and, like phase and all
So
these
normal
like,
people are like, I'm out.
DMX and universes. And you're like, what are you talking
There's
about?
too many universes.
Yeah.
The multiverse. Yeah.
But, and that's something for us production people to learn. Like, I don't have to like get super nerdy about all of my technical stuff on why we can't do something. How do we simplify it and be able to say, yeah, we could do that, but here's the time and energy it's going to take or whatever. So I think that's been helpful, and to communicate that of like, that's something I wish maybe more people would know when it comes to like working together, because it's a both and. I have to not be super nerdy brainy when I'm communicating to someone who doesn't know what I'm doing. And then vice versa, for people to ask little questions like, okay, what's that really going to take? Like, how many hours does that add on to your plate if we add that one thing? It's like, oh, it adds 4 hours. Then it's like, oh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So stuff like that I think is helpful, kind of understanding the cost and what it takes rather than knowing what does it actually, like the details of what it takes to do stuff.
Gosh, that's so helpful. That's so helpful because I think that I see so many gaps in that of like people will often like the natural response is to get into the nitty gritty of the way things are working. And also too, the natural response of like the platform side of like of just asking for something, and not realizing the cost. So that's really helpful, Daniel, of like mending the gap and like in those areas. What would be your encouragement, I guess, what would you tell a leader or a volunteer, just turning our minds like towards the people like listening, maybe in smaller church contexts or different campuses that maybe they're feeling like a little bit of a rub or a little bit of a gap like between their production ministry and the platform ministry. What would be like maybe some encouragement or practical things you would give them?
My initial thought is like, have you leaned in to that relationship? Because I think it can get really easy when we start to feel distance between people to think like, well, they don't want to be my friend, or they just must not like me, or the worship leader, they have their own group and they don't need me and I'm just in the production people and I'm less than or whatever. And the reality is like our worship leaders really do love us and our production leaders really do love us and they love each other because we're all after the same goal. Everybody wants to see more people come to Christ and build the church family, so on and so forth. So how do we lean into the relationships that might feel uncomfy and like, hey, do you want to go to lunch after church? And like, can I take, our family and your family and can we just go to lunch? Or can I grab coffee with you before we go to rehearsal on Thursday? Or whatever that may be. Or send them a text, send them a birthday card, like something to help start slowly bridging the gap to mend those relational equity, just like Connor and Daniel talked about early on. Like relational equity is everything. You don't get there, overnight. You don't build Rome in a night, but little by little, we get there.
Yeah, it's tough because I've been on both sides. I feel like
sure.
And yeah, I think it's just dealing with it head on at an appropriate time, having a conversation over coffee somewhere offline. Because that's the thing too, is like I've been rubbed the wrong way during something like a lot. And I think most of us have rubbed maybe even each other when it's in the moment. And it's like learning to table that, not just like explode, because that's not the time.
Yep.
And I think that's something production people we struggle with is like we're told, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you. And it's like that's not our natural personality. And then it's like we just kind of explode. And we don't know how to actually communicate well, like our feelings and thoughts. And so it's learning, okay, I'm going to table this for now. And then maybe it might not even be as big of a deal as you thought in the moment. Yeah. But then it's just like, hey, like in using like the I language, like I felt this when you said this to me off the stage.
Right.
I felt this way, all these kinds of things, and kind of just explaining, I think, that you care about what's going on and that we're all in this together and you want it to be good too. Because I think that's kind of an assumption sometimes is that maybe production people care a little less than the worship team does or whatever. We're creating these divides in our heads. It doesn't actually exist. It's just like, and we have different skills and different personalities, but it's just like being able to communicate that well and in a timely way, and like an appropriate time and process it. Because like some of us need to process it. So take some time, be like, okay, write it down, whatever you need to do to make sure that they know what you're feeling and what's going on. So you can rebuild that bridge. Because I think we just don't talk. And that's the problem. Like we just don't have these conversations. And then it's like they fester and we become salty and all these kinds of things. And it's like, no, you just got to talk about it. Like be honest. And I've never had a honest conversation that didn't help. It's like we've had these hard conversations and they're honest and it's like, okay, but then it's like, it just keeps getting better. Yeah. Because you are taking in terms of relational collateral, you're taking a step. You're like, we're going to be real with each other. We're taking a step in a direction that's deeper. Like we're going to be deeper friends or deeper coworkers or whatever. Yeah. And hopefully building that relational collateral, like
Yeah.
knowing what sports teams they like, knowing these things. It's not just this like, it's either work or nothing. You know, it's like knowing their kids' names, knowing all these kinds of things, I think all equal a better result in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. You know, a lot of it has to do with communication and action. You know, we could talk about loving and being respectful for each other, but there's like, as a one thing I love about our teams is like we're really good at stage plots. And I'm not joking, for a production person, that's like our love language, to know what this, like where people are going to be on stage prior to like having to set up
100%.
cables and mics and stuff like that.
Our MDs are so amazing.
Oh, praise God.
favorite.
They truly are. And, you know, like we're really detail oriented and planning center. And that didn't just happen overnight. That happened through relationship of learning, like, what does like respecting one another look like in this space? And a lot of it is like communication and action. So like, we feel very loved as production people when we get a stage plot, when we get song scans, when we know what songs are going to be happening on the weekend. And let's say we get 80% and there's like another 20% that changes. At least we got 80, you know?
Yeah.
On the other end, for us as production people to kind of help love those on the platform is to review those documents, to study them, to show that we really cared about the time and energy they put into that.
Yep.
You know, so for them to show up with the plot looking like what they sent, you know, and if we have questions, we could communicate in that. We could ask questions. We could say, hey, I heard there's potentially 2 keyboards, but I don't see it on the plot. Like, just want to, you know, I think that's a big piece, you know, like action and communication actually equals love within both sides of these teams, you know? Yes. And in like 1 John 3, it says, "Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with action and in truth." And just like, we can't get to real love and respect for one another if it's just talk. There has to be action behind it. And that goes a long way, because if you're just showing up week to week and it's just kind of this like fire drill thing, probably is pointing to the fact that there's not a lot of communication happening towards your production team, you know, and understanding the costs of like, when I say just move the drum kit over to the other side of the stage, like, was that a big deal, you know? But if you don't know the cost of like, oh man, we had to like tear down the drum riser and reset it up and you know, those things go a long way in building relational equity and allowing there to be just a lot of grace for one another and stuff. So,
because I think too, like a lot of times with worship, it's just weekend to weekend. We're just going and going. And it feels like sometimes your work just goes out into the void. Like it's just like, I'm doing all this prep and then it just like is gone. You know, no one really cares.
Yep.
But then it's like when I feel like when a production person is like, hey, MD, I noticed that on PCO, there's 2 keyboard players, but on the stage plot, there's 1. And it's like, oh, somebody, you're kind of like, we're in this together. And we both, like, I'm noticing, I'm paying enough attention to detail. And then it's like, well, there's like a trust being built there. It's like, oh, someone does look at these documents. Like someone does. If I'm spending an hour a week on this thing, somebody's looking at it. It's someone's like, not really, but their Bible. Like they are like, this is what I'm building our entire audio system around for this weekend, because this is what it says on the stage plot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And taking that extra step to communicate that and like not be like, well, maybe it's wrong, you know, and just reaching out. Because I sucked at that for such a long time. Like I would never take the extra step to like, hey, I noticed this. And it was like, hey, just do that. And people will be very happy about that.
Yeah. So platform people, give your production team a heads up of what's going to happen on the weekend.
Yeah.
Production people, do your homework and be ready for it.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Yeah. And even if you know that like there's a lot of things up in the air, communicating that I think is awesome too. Like we all don't know what's going on somewhat of a weekend, you know? So
we just stay flexible.
Yeah.
See what's going to happen.
But as long as like you're communicating that, like, hey, like super sorry, we do not know if this is actually going to land, but this is what we're planning on doing. It's like, cool, we can hold to that as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're like in the same like mental space as the worship team. It's like, we're not like, oh, this is what we're doing. It's like, no, actually that was never the plan. It's like, and that's what our Wednesday meeting helps out a lot too, because it's just like, yeah, I don't know, man. This song might happen. This song might not happen. It's like, cool,
Right.
good to
You have,
know.
like, contingency plan A,
Yeah.
B, C.
Yeah.
And you're like, our producer will let us know in the moment. We'll let you guys know. It'll be great.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
That's so great, guys. I love love is action. Like that's such a great thing that we can all sit in. Of like, what does love and action look like for me in the seat that I sit in, for the seat that I serve in, in this particular week. And sometimes that is like if mending the gap is getting lunch with someone or getting coffee with someone or just building more relational equity with the team, or let's all go out and do whatever, outside of the weekend. Maybe it's that. Maybe love is having a hard conversation, with either your worship leader or vice versa, or with someone on the team, and being prayerful about those things too. Because
100%.
if you do need to have a conversation, I just go have it, pray about it, write those things down, and just know that like God is like in those things. It's good for us to put things out there and to be able to communicate to one another so we can serve and love one another well and build those relationships. And so I love that you guys brought all of that today.
Yeah. And we always say praise in public, like critique in private.
Yeah.
Like even for production people, like it's so helpful when if someone gives you a compliment, how do you help pass that to your team as well? And I love that about our circle time. We'll do call outs and stuff because that's an opportunity where you're able to shine a light on like spaces that most people don't see, which is so it's like, none of us signed up to do tech to like, because we don't want to be on stage. So we typically don't want the spotlight, but it never hurts to hear someone compliment you about what you're doing or to hear you're doing a good job or, and it's really honoring, if you're serving your team to hear something from a drummer being like, yo, my inner mix sounds great this week. Like, you're like, oh, cool. Thanks for saying that in front of everyone. That goes a long way for production teams 100%. As well. So
yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Just like in that little moment, we're about to pray for service. Hey, by the way, this thing is awesome.
Yeah.
That goes so far. Daniel.
And vice versa from tech people to also say, yo, so-and-so did an awesome job leading that. Or the guitar part here was, because most of the time you don't hear that. You just only hear like, oh, your amp's too loud, turn it down.
Yeah. I love that too, Daniel, because that's something that we can all do. Like no matter what church context, no matter what ministry space you're serving, we can all lift one another up in that way.
That's right.
And the same thing too with like communication of like, we may not all have places where we do like tons of stage plots or different things, but we can all figure out ways to make communication clear and streamlined.
Right.
I think we were out in the Midwest recently doing a conference, and I loved someone brought up like the ease of just streamlining communication from the stage to the booth of like, okay, we'll say like you have a drummer, even if it's a small room, and instead of them just shouting over the monitor, like, hey, could you turn this down or whatever, or turn this up, or I need this or whatever, of just like streamlining that through like a worship leader or a vocalist of just like, hey, like the vocalist, their worship leader is going to communicate ear changes, of just any way to eliminate shouting, any way to eliminate just raising voices across the room, because it raises tensions even if there aren't any, Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That's one thing I love about our venue is there's no yelling. And our room is so big that there's a lot of like, Connor's on the other side of the room and I have to yell to the stage from him, like you would think I'm just angry all the time.
Yeah. Yep.
But I love like our comm system and the way our worship leaders communicate and our monitor engineers. They're just awesome. So, because it makes tensions look like they're there that aren't there. So,
For sure. Well, as we wrap up, I'd love to ask you guys, like, what's your hope and prayer for production teams, just as like holistically, just across like just the Big C Church as we step into the future? What's your prayer for production teams as we look to the future?
Oh, it's a deep question.
yeah.
Made you think.
I know. This one got me. I think for me, it's like, I think we're coming out of the dark ages of like the salty, grumpy, introverted production team a little bit.
Right.
And I think like I've always been encouraged to be myself, but also like step out of the box a little bit and take steps that are out of my comfort zone. I'd pray that production teams just taking little steps. Like what's the little thing you can do to kind of bust out of the comfort zone? Because I think your entire team is going to feel that. Like we are behind the scenes. So like Daniel said, if no one's ever heard you speak, and then one day you're like, hey, so-and-so, you're really doing really good on drums. I bet that's going to mean more to them than the most extroverted member of that team saying that. It's like the fact that you would step out and do something like that, like I think is a huge deal. And so it's just taking baby steps and just keep growing, just keep stepping out of the box a little bit, and just like asking to pray before services, like things like that's for production team, that's kind of like we all are believers hopefully in the church, and so it's like, do you pray? Like
right.
like it's a little bit different, like and it's hard, but it's like take that step, like make that move, and I'm sure like people will be blessed. Like your input, your prayer, all that stuff is going to be felt and valued. And so just taking small steps, it's going to be huge.
Yeah. For me, like the moments that stand out to me the most, and like what has helped me in my journey of ministry and serving, is when people took time to pour into me. And to kind of keep, my prayer is that we just keep that as our priority, that people are our priority in this. And I think that will go into what we actually do on a weekend, that at the end of the day, all of this stuff, the lights and the music and all of that stuff, it's really to help point towards Jesus and to help our community as we gather together, that's something that we would point towards, and if we're so focused on how the mix is and lighting, my prayer is that we don't miss what's actually happening in the room, that we're so caught up on just all of the details of production and the process and different protocols that we miss the people that are there, and we miss even for ourselves what God's doing in the room, that we miss all of these moments of encountering Jesus ourselves, because it's so easy to hide behind a booth, sit down, put your head down, do the parts you like, and then once the sermon comes on, you kind of like start checking Instagram. It's like, no, that's for me too, and one of the things our team has always led with is like, let us be first. Let us be first that is impacted by the sermon, or let these songs mean more to us than just a song, to us first. I love it on weekends for communion. Typically our team will partake in communion before the service, because we want to go there first, right? And we're the first in, shout out to Todd Elliott, the Philo conference. We're the first in, last out. And that's how we also want to be with what happens in that space and in that room. We want to be worshiping first through rehearsal and stuff, not just sing songs and sound check. Like there's so much more in there, and hopefully our midweek is full of worship, and our midweek of our time with the Lord and, worshiping on our own and stuff, that the weekend's just an overflow of the work that we've been putting in midweek and stuff. So that's kind of my prayer, that we don't miss it, that we don't just attend or mix a service, but we're actually a part of it.
Yeah, that's so good, Daniel. Like, and for those of us too, that can speak to anyone, like platform or wherever you serve in the house of the Lord. Like, a lot of us are so used to serving that we forget that when we're there, faith is for you, conviction is for you, encouragement is for you. All of that is for you too, and to sit under the Word of God and to receive all that. That's huge, Daniel. What about you, Brittany?
I would love to see us come out of, being back in the booth people and people that, Connor said salty and I had to laugh, because that is kind of the like token, like, all those production people that are really aligned with vision with their home churches. And, midweek events, extra conferences, extra whatever, don't become a burden, but just such a blessing to be able to serve our church families in that way. We do like marriage nights here. We do things with our kids ministry here, youth nights here. And like, sometimes they can be long and the prep from them can be confusing or long or whatever. But like, the reality is we get to see marriages restored and like kids find faith. And like, we all found this love of serving in production at a young age. And like, what if that's when their story starts too? So why would we not invest in junior high and high school kids? Like what a blessing it is to get to serve in those ministries and be leaders there. And so that is my heart, is that we would align ourselves with the local church and not be this like off-brand siloed ministry, but part of our home churches and take ownership of that.
That's really good, guys. That's really good. I just feel convicted to say as we close, I want to say to you guys and to any production person who's listening, thank you. Like, thank you for the hours that you put in, for the things that are unseen, for the things that no one will ever know about, the way you set the table for people to come receive grace, to receive forgiveness, to receive hope, to receive joy, for all of those things, for all the little things that you guys do. Thank you. And thank you guys so much for being on the Lead with Worship podcast. We're so glad that you joined us today, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, I really hope that conversation blessed and encouraged you today. I loved what Daniel Scotty was saying there in the conversation, that challenge, that invitation to all of us, particularly in our production ministries, to not miss what God is actually doing in the room, how we can get so focused behind our consoles or our cameras or even at our instruments or our microphones to actually miss what God is doing in the space and restoring marriages and helping and healing so many people, including ourselves. So I love that conversation. I hope it was a real encouragement to you as well. You can stay connected with us in a few different ways. First of all, stay up to date with Saddleback Worship's original music wherever you stream your music. Also, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your questions, episode ideas, and ways we can serve you. So you can email us at worshippodcast@saddleback.com. Again, that's worshippodcast@saddleback.com. Lastly, this podcast is one of the many podcasts produced by Saddleback Church. We have the Doable Discipleship podcast, The Well, and more. So be sure to check out those links in the episode description. We're really glad we got to spend some time with you today, and we'll see you next time on Lead with Worship.